Hello, and thank you for joining us on E-course 1 of the SOLUTIONSplus Global e-learning programme. This video will cover Module 2 of Unit 2 of E-course 1. Module 1 of this unit looked at the different roles of actors in electromobility, and this module follows on by looking at user needs. We start by giving an overview of the stakeholders and then the approaches to citizen and stakeholder engagement. We then look at a case study of citizen and user feedback regarding light electric vehicles. A different presentation will then follow on with fleet operator needs and the needs of public authorities and legislative needs. Regarding the stakeholders, there are 6 main groups. The needs to be considered with any e-mobility planning and implementation include not only the users and potential users, but also the effects on other groups and institutions. So among citizens, users of electric vehicles are a key group, but so are users of traditionally fueled vehicles, who are a target for shifting to electric mobility. Other road users, such as pedestrians and cyclists, should be considered as well, especially when it comes to allocation of road space. Public transport passengers are another important group, especially where buses, taxis and other forms of shared or collective mobility are being moved to electric propulsion. Accessibility to electromobility is a consideration. It cannot be a preserve of the rich. Short-term rental or sharing schemes for cars or light vehicles can reduce the need for car ownership and also be equitable. Finally, for all residents, especially in urban areas, noise and pollution are key problems which can be alleviated by a shift to e-mobility. For businesses ranging from delivery and logistics companies to taxi drivers, time is money. Electric vehicles can reduce their costs and cut down on the carbon footprint, but to make the shift they need the assurance that their operations will not be impeded by a lack of charging facilities, for example. Existing fleets can't be replaced overnight, and smaller operators may not have the resources to acquire electric vehicles in the short term. Care must be taken, for example, if restricting certain road space to electric vehicles only, so that essential businesses continue to function. Going on to approaches to citizen and stakeholder engagement, there are 4 main steps to citizen and stakeholder engagement. First, understanding the needs and problems, then co-developing solutions together with the citizens, then implementing these solutions, and finally, continually monitoring and evaluating them. These 4 steps are carried out on 5 levels, as you can see here on the bottom of the page. Informing, this means allowing the public or other stakeholders to have objective information and help them to understand the alternatives to the problem, opportunities and solutions. The second one, consulting, means obtaining feedback, collecting data from the public and stakeholders on suggestions, personal experience, alternatives and project decisions. Engaging is working with the public or other stakeholders throughout the process to ensure that the public's concerns and aspirations are consistently understood and considered. Collaborating is partnering with the public or with other stakeholders on every aspect of the decision, including developing alternatives and identifying the preferred solution. And finally, empowerment is placing the decision as much as possible in the hands of the public or other stakeholders. With regard to the approaches to citizen and stakeholder engagement, there are several ways of going about this. Of course, the normal publicity or information is one way. Communication to inform, things like events and brochures, display panels, social media, video, television and radio. Surveys to collect information can be online or self-completion or by telephone. Interviews will provide a more personal approach by telephone or face-to-face. Also, workshops or public meetings can be held physically or online with such as focus groups of experts, stakeholders or other users. Public debates can also take place. Competitions or games may be relevant in certain circumstances, as may online voting. Before any deployment, user needs surveys need to be carried out. All of the population to be reached needs to be considered. Who are we looking for? All of the citizens, and if so, the citizens of where? A city or a region or an entire country? Consider that an online survey with a hyperlink published in social media, for example, might get responses from anywhere in the world. So consider where you want responses from and be clear about it. Residents of a particular municipality or district perhaps may be targeted, or users of one or more modes of transport, car drivers, cyclists, bus users, for example. Specific population groups such as students or young people, older people, women, disabled people, people working in a certain area, or shopping, or tourists, or business owners. All of this will determine the expected number of answers. If it's going to be a high number because you're targeting a very wide group, better to keep to a multiple choice questionnaire for ease of analysis without many open answers. For a low number, if you're targeting a smaller number of users or groups, you can adapt a more personal approach or have open questions. The length of a survey is also a key consideration. The longer it is, the more likely it is that people might drop out before the end. And also the format of the survey, the terminology, the availability in different languages, whether it's questions are compulsory or optional, or if you give a don't know opinion or no opinion option. When surveying operators or businesses, this is a more targeted population. So we need to consider current users of services such as electric vehicle users, as well as potential future users, fleet operators such as public transport, taxis, ride hailing, cycle hire, delivery and logistics, car sharing schemes, and other service providers such as car parks and navigation providers and traffic management. Other businesses such as retail, office and leisure operators with respect to access to their premises by customers or employees are also a key consideration. Crucially, all of these groups can be divided into two main subgroups: managers, who are the decision makers, who will be concerned as to how measures or services affect their business, and workers, for example drivers of vehicles, who will often be the ones having to use a service or comply with new rules or procedures. A different approach is needed for each managers and workers. We now move on to a case study for citizen and user feedback regarding light electric vehicles. This comes from the European project called LV10, which focused on light vehicles and was light vehicle demonstrations in 6 countries in Europe. Citizen and user surveys were carried out in 2018 and 2020 at the beginning and after the end of these demonstrations. The project demonstrated light 2, 3 and 4 wheel vehicles in 6 cities in Italy, Germany and Greece. The aims of the 2018 surveys before the demonstrations were to collect public perceptions on light electric vehicles among all citizens in these cities. Also to interview fleet operators, managers and drivers to ascertain their needs and interests in moving some or all of their operations to light electric vehicles. After the demonstrations, surveys took place to assess the usage of these vehicles in the demonstration cities, user satisfaction and also citizens' perceptions, including non-users. The survey was designed using a standard survey tool which was user-friendly, quick loading, no external advertising. It could also be custom branded to the city, the project or the product. If you're doing the survey, provide a choice of languages where appropriate and make sure that you explain at the beginning whether a personal information or contact information will be asked, and if so, make it clear how that will be used. Give a privacy policy and also an email or website to contact in case of questions or complaints. Try to keep to closed questions such as multiple choice or Likert scales from like to dislike, or things from a scale on 1 to 5 or 1 to 10. Because free text answers are often very difficult to analyse and time consuming if there are a lot of responses. When you're giving users a scale, for example from good to bad or strongly agree to strongly disagree, consider if no experience or don't know options are also needed. Many people should not be forced to judge something if they don't have an opinion on it. It might skew the results. Surveys lasting over 10 minutes start to suffer from respondents abandoning it before the end, so try to keep it shorter than this. Avoid acronyms and technical terms as well, of course. Here's an example of one of the survey results. We asked users if they would be interested in using a light electric vehicle sharing or rental scheme if one was available in their city. You can see the dark green at the bottom is yes frequently, and then the other greens are yes, occasionally or maybe. So a significant majority in all of these 6 cities said that they were interested in using such a scheme. Of course, this is stated preference, so it doesn't necessarily mean that it will pan out in real life, but it does show a very strong interest in light electric vehicle sharing schemes in 6 cities. Another result showed the perception of safety of different kinds of light electric vehicles, 2, 3 and 4 wheel vehicles, by age group, young, middle and older, and by gender, male and female. As you can see, there is not a major difference between the age groups and the genders, but you can see that the younger age groups and males considered vehicles a little bit more safe than females and older age groups. Also, in the 2018 survey, we asked what people thought were the most important measures to facilitate or increase the use of light electric vehicles. You can see the second column, which is the largest one, is to provide sufficient electric charging infrastructure. The final column, which is the second largest, is to provide incentive schemes for using or renting light electric vehicles, and the third most popular choice was to allow light electric vehicles to use bus or cycle lanes. In this question, users could select up to 3 responses. After the end of the demonstrations, users were asked the number of times they used the service during the length of the demonstration, which was almost 1 year. Just over half, 55%, used the vehicles more than 20 times. We also asked how often they would be willing to use light electric vehicles in the future, and around 2/3 said regularly, at least once a week. And then finally we asked, has using light electric vehicles become a habit for you? And just over half said not yet, but potentially in the future. These graphs show the difference between actual usage and intended usage. So this is a very important way to decide how to phrase the question. And in the third graph, we asked whether light electric vehicles has become a habit. 44% said yes, and 47% said not yet, but potentially in the future. So these 3 graphs show the difference between how people have really used the vehicles and how they say that they will intend to do so in the future. Finally, here are some results on access to charging infrastructure. At home on the left and at the workplace on the right. You can see the blue is the people who say that they did have access to charging infrastructure. The red is no, they didn't, and the green is not yet, but potentially in the near future. So you can see that there is still some way to go, especially regarding workplace charging, where over 1/3 do not have access to such charging facilities at the moment.